in chapters 9 through 12 today. Okay, so today, instead of reading from the annotated and explained edition, we will still be using that as a reference, but we're going to read the entirety of the text today from the Stephen Mitchell translation of the Tao. Now, Jessica, this is the one that you have a copy of, and this is my favorite copy of the Tao. I do like reading the other interpretations just to get a fuller understanding of the text, but this one just, I don't know, it flows very eloquently, and I feel like it just kind of touches the soul in a unique way. So I look forward to reading from this one. So starting out in chapter 9. Fill your bowl to the brim, and it will spill. Keep sharpening your knife, and it will blunt. Chase after money and security, and your heart will never unclench. Care about people's approval, and you will be their prisoner. Do your work, then step back. The only path to serenity. Can you coax your mind from its wandering and keep to the original oneness? Can you let your body become supple as a newborn child's? Can you cleanse your inner vision until you see nothing but the light? Can you love people and lead them without imposing your will? Can you deal with the most vital matters by letting events take their course? Can you step back from your own mind and thus understand all things, giving birth and nourishing, having without possessing, acting with no expectations, leading and not trying to control? This is the supreme virtue. We join spokes together in a wheel, but it is the center hole that makes the wagon move. We shape clay into a pot, but it is the emptiness inside that holds whatever we want. We hammer wood for a house, but it is the inner space that makes it livable. We work with being, but non-being is what we use. Colors blind the eye, sounds deafen the ear, flavors numb the taste, thoughts weaken the mind, desires wither the heart. The master observes the world, but trusts his inner vision. He allows things to come and go. His heart is open as the sky. All right, so you can see I went a little crazy. um, so now we're going to go back and we're going to kind of pick this together or pick this apart one chunk at a time, and then we can talk about each individual verse at the end. Okay. Holding a cup and overfilling it cannot be as good as stopping short. Pounding a blade and sharpening it cannot be kept for long. If you continue filling a pail after it is full, the water will be wasted. If you continue grinding an axe after it is sharp, the edge will wear away. Fill your bowl to the brim and it will spill. Keep sharpening your knife and it will blunt. Moderation and restraint are crucial to life. The sages note that an overflowing cup isn't necessarily a good thing because the area around the cup gets wet and messy very quickly. It is better to stop short of fullness. Similarly, if you pound a blade repeatedly and sharpen it too much, it will break easily and won't last very long. In general, doing anything to excess is a bad idea. The smarter way is to do just enough and nothing extra. When in doubt, stop just short of the point that you think is the optimum. So, I want to kind of explore this a little bit. Would you say that overflow is a bad thing?
I never thought I would say yes before this study, but thinking about balance and how important moderation and stuff is,
Mhm.
I do think it can be a bad thing. I don't like saying it that way, but yeah,
Do you think it would be bad in all circumstances or just some?
it's hard to say because I really want to say just some, but then
Mhm.
I think that's my mind trying to pick what is, okay to overflow in and what is not when I don't need
Mhm.
to think that much. I really
Okay,
think the answer is yes. And in all things, I think too much is too much.
interesting.
I don't know. That's just my gut feeling right now. I think
Yeah.
not that not that there is a right answer. It's
No, no,
just
no.
my
Yeah.
my gut is telling me that to achieve balance, you have to have equal, amounts, not too much of anything.
Yeah. Um, I would say that in most instances, I would agree with you. I fully believe in moderation in all things, never too much of any one thing. But I wonder, at least in the terms of the word overflow, to me, I don't get a negative connotation when I think of the word overflow. I think of, the waters of the Nile overflowing and watering the rich delta every year and making for some of the richest soil in the entire world, despite the fact that it's kind of in the midst of a desert. You know what I mean? So when I think of overflow, I think of things that are substantial. Now, granted, if the levees break and you have a flood, generally that's not a good thing. But I think that perhaps maybe I am thinking that there are different levels of overflow. Because if I am able to pour enough into my own cup that I can then fill other people's cups too, and then they can fill other people's cups too, to me, that kind of overflow is a good thing. So I'm thinking of it in terms of like overflowing with love and generosity and kindness, things that aren't necessarily tangible. Whereas, like a river overflowing is more tangible. Does that make sense? Like, I don't necessarily mean an
Yes,
overflow that's
yes,
physical.
yes. So that does make perfect sense. And that's why it didn't feel right. Because I also, we've all heard fill your um, cup, like you can't fill someone else's cup unless your cup's full, like you can't help others unless you help yourself, kind of thing. So I do think that there is different levels for sure.
Yeah.
And the way that you just said it reminds me of like the ripple effect,
But the
kind
visual
of
that I
thing.
had in my mind was like, have you ever seen like at a wedding or something where they'll have champagne glasses and it'll be in like a pyramid shape and they'll pour from the top and it will all flow
Mm-hmm.
down into the ones below. That was
Yes,
the visual that I was seeing when I was talking about that. If I'm full, then naturally I'm just going to outpour onto those who are around me. You know what I mean?
right. Yeah,
That's
makes sense.
that's where I would say that overflow isn't a bad thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
But in the physical realm, I feel generally speaking, at least at this moment, I can't think of anything where I would say that overflow is okay in the physical realm. I think there is
Right,
such a thing as having too much money, too much to eat. Heaven's sakes, if you drink too much water, you can die, right?
right.
So I don't feel like it's the same principle in the physical as it is in the spiritual.
I would have to agree.
Any thoughts? Any thoughts, Katie? I'm keeping an eye on the chat, so if you have anything to add and you can't talk, drop it in the chat. I'll see it. Okay. Oh, hold on a second. Gold and jade fill up the room. No one is able to protect them. Wealth and position bring arrogance and leave disasters upon oneself. Who can protect a house full of gold and jewels? Excessive fortune brings about its own misfortune. Chase after money and security, and your heart will never unclench. So I I feel like the word choice here, misfortune, is very fitting, especially when you see that just before that we have fortune, right? Excessive fortune brings about its own misfortune. Um, this kind of goes back to that idea of balance. When we tip the scale too far in one direction, then we have an imbalance on the other side. What are some other things that excessive fortune could bring about besides the obvious like greed or jealousy or envy? What are some other misfortunes having too much fortune could bring about?
Um, Maybe isolation,
Ooh,
maybe.
okay.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's a possible, not every time, obviously, but it's
Yeah.
a something possible. Um,
Well, to that point, I mean, are you able to really trust anyone in your life to be authentic?
I don't know.
You know what I mean? Like if you have tons and tons and tons of money, are people your friend just because you have money? Or are they your friend because they genuinely want to be your friend? You know what I mean?
I guess it's your perspective on it, but misfortune could definitely be sometimes finding that being the case, that people are not 100% your friend
Yeah.
and just using you.
Or say you have too much fortune and you think, oh, well, I've got plenty. Let me kind of be careless with it, or maybe invest a bunch of it into something that I think is risky, but it's probably a good investment, and then you end up losing some of it and getting humbled a little bit.
Yeah. Well,
uh,
again, I think too much of anything, it can throw off your kind of your new normal. It can be like your homeostasis is no longer what it should be.
exactly. I do really enjoy the way that Stephen Mitchell puts it, where he says that your heart will never unclench. If you're so busy seeking after money and security, you're going to be focused on that and you're not going to be worried about matters of the heart so much, right? Sometimes I think people end up in survival mode when they're stuck thinking about, am I going to have enough money to survive or whatever?
Yeah, I mean, that's how some people end up killing for money. I mean, they literally put it above someone's life.
Mhm.
It takes a heartless person to do that.
Mhm. My kids like to play this game with me where it's like, Mom, would you do this for this amount of money? It's usually, would you eat cockroaches or would you do something gross and disgusting, and I'm always like, nope, not even for $1 trillion, Mom. Nope, that's gross. But then if they say, well, what about if it's to save your kids? Well, of course I'm gonna do it. Oh, that's cute. um so this annotation, it says a room that is full of treasures is like an overflowing cup. It becomes the target of thieves and robbers and cannot be safeguarded forever. Arrogance as the result of great wealth or high position is like a blade that has been sharpened too much. It is an invitation to disaster. That's interesting. So, this idea of having too much, just kind of drawing in things that you don't really want. I don't feel like that really fits in all cases, though. What?
I don't have too much.
How do you know when you have too much? That's a good question. How do you know when you have too much? What is too much? So for me, I would have to say I have too much when I stop appreciating it. You know what I mean? Or when it becomes my sole focus, instead of valuing the things that are actually important, only valuing that which is physical, the fortune. Yeah. What is too much? I mean, there are people in the world that are perfectly content to live in a dirt floor hut and, eat rice, beans, and bugs for most of their days and fiddle around in the dirt and the mud and have no trouble. And then there are the wealthiest, most affluent people living in these beautiful golden glass mansions and living a miserable existence. I mean, is less more? There's a lot of people that have given up the big fancy houses to go live in a van. And they're just so stinking happy. It's ridiculous.
Wow, wow,
You still gotta clean it, but I mean, that is a good question. I wonder if that's not something that could have a definitive answer. I think it would be dependent on the individual, so it would be relative. It wouldn't be an absolute. What's too much for you may not be too much for me, and vice versa. Any thoughts on that, ladies? How do you know when you have too much?
What you said.
Okay. When achievement is completed, fame is attained. Withdraw oneself. This is the Tao of heaven. To win true merit, to earn a good reputation, you must be prudent. This is the way of the Tao. Care about people's approval and you will be their prisoner. Do your work, then step back. The only path to serenity. So, a couple of things I wanted to talk about here. First of all, this idea of caring about another person's approval, making you their prisoner, that, at least from my perspective, looks like your fear of their judgment. How many times have we allowed other people's opinions of us to hold us back from the things that we know we should be doing or could be doing?
Far too long.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everybody, especially with being our true authentic self, everybody's really, but we grow up in a society where that is the case. They want you to feel, well, like you said, even when it came to different tribes, if you had the disapproval, then they ostracize you out.
Mhm.
And you could very well see that today because a lot of people are afraid to be their true authentic self because they are indeed afraid of being ostracized and cast out of society, which little do they know is probably the best thing that could happen to them.
This is true. This is true. Well, so notice that in the Sam Tarot translation, the pink words on the screen, it says you must be prudent. in order to earn a good reputation. So I wanted to look up that word. That word actually means wise, discerning, judicious, knowing, sagacious, and to act with foresight. So this idea of being prudent, I think, lends a bit to our understanding of listening to our own kind of internal voice, our own intuition, being wise and aware of the things that are going on around us, and being honest with ourselves about our perceptions of them. I think too that it's important for us to remember that as we use this discernment to pass our own judgments, so to speak, we need to stay humble, right? We need to be able to look at ourselves and others with grace while still being discerning. And that's a delicate balance sometimes. I was just watching a video about Marcus Aurelius, and something that he was kind of trying to teach about how we need to be able to look at others the way we would look at ourselves, and vice versa. Like we need to be able to take a an objective look at ourselves from another person's perspective, and then also be able to take a look at another person from their own perspective, walk a mile in their shoes, so to speak. um, I think that being able to utilize uh, a measure of humility with careful judgment, and I don't like that word, careful discernment, um, can kind of help us to maintain that middle path. Um, One of the things I did want to add was those who chase after the trappings of the physical world tend to miss the meaningful human connections as well as a connection to spirit. So for me personally, the idea of this misfortune coming through excessive fortune or fame is that you're missing that sincere connection to the all and everyone around you because you're so busy focused on something that is temporary. Whereas those human connections, they will leave impressions on your soul that are eternal. And to me, that's far more important. The annotation here is to withdraw oneself does not mean to retreat from society and become a hermit. It means there is no need to brag about your achievements, take on pompous airs, or put on showy displays. Once you have achieved success and fame, it is best to step gracefully, quietly aside. So I find this idea an interesting one to explore because I feel like this is a bit of a challenge in today's society due to our culture, due to the fact that everything is on social media and everybody's a content creator now, and everyone's just showing their highlight reel to the world. How much more challenging is it to keep ourselves from narcissism, basically? And then to that end, how do we turn away from that? Because that's really not the goal. We can still be out there putting out meaningful content to help other people, but not anything that requires any sort of concern for other people's judgment or any expectation of recognition. You know what I mean? How can we stay humble in a look at me culture and still be present in it? how do we do that? Mhm.
This is probably what I really need to hear tonight because I have been posting things lately of a hobby that I like to do with jewelry making.
Mhm.
But I have to catch myself and ask myself why I'm posting it. Is it for others to, say how beautiful it is or like that sort of thing?
Mhm.
Or is it just because it's what I like to do and it's not about who likes it and what they have to comment, just
Yeah.
trying to be more social again.
Yeah.
So, how do I keep myself from calling victims that I don't know? Katie, what do you have to say? I guess just stay in the moment, like not worry about others.
Yeah, that is a good tactic. Definitely stay present and
Keep
um
doing me. Just
yeah,
if
I
it
think
makes me happy, do it, not look for others' approval. I've already approved it. That's why I posted it.
Katie like
I don't know.
that. Um, what if we did the things that we love to do, or even if it is doing like creating content for the world to consume, which sounds weird to me, but I mean literally that's what we're doing right at this moment, right? We are technically creating content for others to consume, right? But what if in the process of doing that, instead of worrying about like the outcome, worrying about the achievement, not that we don't want to focus on an end product so much, but like, what is the goal of it? Is the goal to inform or inspire, or is the goal to achieve recognition? If we're doing it because we want to enjoy the journey, or, like put something meaningful out into the collective conscious, and not just for clicks and likes and follows and all of that, then I think that we um, will obsess less about something like that. I think that personally, as someone who is trying to grow an audience on TikTok for the purpose of being able to go live so that I can do more things, um, it is kind of humbling to get on there and see that you've only got one new follower or whatever. But I don't really tie myself too much to this expectation of I have to have X amount of followers by this date. And maybe that's not a good business strategy, but I just don't care. It'll come when it comes. It'll be in divine timing. So maybe that's another aspect of it, is to be able to trust in divine timing, right? Knowing that things go the way they need to go, in the way they need to go them, in the exact time that they need to go that way, for a reason, and all we need to do is just go with the flow, right? Um, so stay humble. Don't fear other people's judgment. Yeah, it's neither good or bad. It just is. Exactly.
Yes, exactly. And I am, oh, you know what? This is number 13 that I was reading today. So I won't jump that far ahead. I will read just one line, just one. It's it says, see the world as yourself, have faith in the way things are. And that, speaks to me because being in the present moment and just being exactly where you're supposed to be, like you said, divine timing. I trust that 100%. So I'm not going to be here too much longer on the study tonight because I do have company coming into town, but we're not making it to that book today anyway. But that's just what I thought of when you guys were talking.
All right, good stuff. Any final thoughts, comments, or are we ready to continue on? Anything? That is nice. Continue. All right. Okay. In holding the soul and embracing oneness, can one be steadfast without straying? By patience, you can discipline your desires. By self-control, you can develop strong character. Can you coax your mind from its wandering and keep to the original oneness? Okay, so our first annotation here says straying refers to deviating from centered oneness caused by the distractions of the material. Some translations render it as separation or division, thus obscuring the original meaning and making these lines more difficult to understand. So I did want to point out that this idea of being steadfast, this word means firm and unshakable. So when we are yes, we need to, exactly, we need to be our own center. We need to be grounded in ourselves. We need to be unmoved by whatever comes at us. No matter how hard the waves come crashing in, we don't budge, right? No matter how still the silence is, we aren't affected, right? Not deviating by those other opinions, judgments, external circumstances. Exactly. Our external should not affect our internal. And you know, I'm toying with this idea of if our exterior realm is simply a mirror for what's going on in our hearts and in our minds, then we could theoretically change our exterior realm by calming the storms in our own minds, right? We just learn to stand still, be still and know, then we're not giving into worry. You know, even the Bible says that, you know, people who are double-minded are like a ship tossed about on the ocean. You can't in one breath say, oh, you know, I hope for this or I believe this and have this positivity come out of one side of your mouth and then the other side of your mouth you are speaking doubt and worry and fear. That's not firm and unshakable. That's wavering. That's straying. That is not self-control at all. That's a wandering mind. And we should be working to discipline that, right? In concentrating the energy and reaching relaxation, can one be like an infant? By practicing gentleness, you can become as a little child. By purifying the subconscious, you may become perfect. Can you let your body become supple as a newborn child's? So I wanted to point out this verse in Matthew 18, verses 2 through 4. This is Christ here. He called a little child to him and placed the child among them. And he said, truly, I tell you, unless you change and become like little children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Therefore, whoever takes the lowly position of this child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. So this idea of becoming like a little child really stood out to me. And I'm going to juxtapose this with the annotation that came out of the annotated and explained version of the Tao Te Ching from Derek Lin. The energy to be concentrated is qi, the breath or energy that courses through all living things. This is a clear instruction on using breathing techniques to achieve a deep level of relaxation, where the body is as soft and pliant as that of an infant. Now that's interesting. I feel like this goes much deeper than just the meditation, relaxation, breathing technique aspect. I do see the value in that, yes, and in the breath work, I do think that that is an important aspect of this, but I don't think that's all that it is. Because just before this, in the Sam Torah tradition or translation, the one in the middle, by practicing gentleness, you can become as a little child. So this idea of gentle, relaxed, I don't see this just as a meditative state, but also as a general state of being always, just being gentle and kind. um, they're speaking of yours, Katie. They're speaking of your kids. In cleaning away the worldly view, can one be without imperfections? In loving the people and ruling the nation, can one be without manipulation? Because wise rulers love the people, they lead without using force. In measuring our rewards, wise rulers act like mother birds. While seeing into every corner, they are unobtrusive. While protecting the people, they do not control them. Can you cleanse your inner vision until you see nothing but the light? Can you love people and lead them without imposing your will? Let me see. I think this needs to go down just a bit further. Can you deal with the most vital matters by letting events take their course? Can you step back from your own mind and thus understand all things? Okay, so using force. Don't force anything. I got this idea of being like water again. Water doesn't force its way. Water is very formidable. Water can carve through rock. Water can completely change the terrain of a land. Water has some serious power, but it doesn't generally have to force anything. Even a trickle can create an entire, chasm underneath the earth. Um, the soul becoming the master of the avatar in this human experience. I love it. Love it. Yes. Just learning to be that piece of seaweed that just kind of flows in the ocean, right? I love this. Can you love people and lead them without imposing your will? Can you? What are your thoughts? Can you love and lead people without imposing your own will? Ooh, lead by example. Yay, Katie, you're on a roll tonight, girl. Can you lead people without imposing your will? Imposing your will means like wanting them to do what you want them to do.
I would say yes, leading by example, but also showing love and kindness for the person just where they're at. Like having that understanding and that compassion for them anyway, no matter what.
Now, so I'm going to stretch you guys a bit. As parents, how easy is it to lead your children without imposing your will?
Not always easy.
Yeah.
But always coming back to and remembering unconditional love is very helpful,
Mhm.
and giving again with the grace, giving yourself the grace so that you can give others grace, you
Mhm.
know. um yeah, just loving them right where they're at. It's not always easy, but it always ends there for me.
Yeah. Yep. Still learning to be the master and always coming back to the center. Lots of communication. She agrees with you, Jess. Yes, Katie, 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 thank you. Um, in the heavenly gates opening and closing, can one hold to the feminine principle? They are motherly and fatherly. I'm just going to finish reading through this and then we'll go read through all of the notes because it's kind of not quite matching up between the translations. In understanding clearly all directions, can one be without intellectuality, bearing it, rearing it, bearing without possession, achieving without arrogance, raising without domination? This is called the mystic virtue. In measuring our rewards, wise rulers act like mother birds. While seeing into every corner, they are unobtrusive. While protecting the people, they do not control them. They are motherly and fatherly, but not domineering. They persuade with words, not weapons. This is their crowning virtue. Can you deal with the most vital matters by letting events take their course? Can you step back from your own mind and thus understand all things? Giving birth and nourishing, having without possessing, acting with no expectations, leading and not trying to control. This is the supreme virtue. So I did just want to mention that the feminine principle is generally seen as one that is receptive instead of active. It's more of a passive kind of principle. Um, I'll go to this one first, and we'll come back to that. These lines may seem to be directed at kings and emperors, but they actually address the individual as well. Think of the kingdom as a metaphor for your workplace, family, social circle, sports team, and even your immediate surroundings. And the practical utility of this section becomes clear. Right? So, leading with gentleness, leading with grace and love, right? The feminine principle refers to the yin principle of serenity and quietude. The opening and closing of the gate refers to the mind in motion and at rest. Together, these two lines describe a mental state that remains tranquil even when thought processes are active, a state that is simultaneously peaceful and dynamic. Um, okay, so Katie's saying in the Trinity, the passive and denying is female, and the male is active and approving. Yes. So I do find it interesting, though, that it's talking about the feminine principle being both peaceful and dynamic. While the mind is tranquil, it does not mean that there is no thought process going on. There are still thought processes going on, but it's not a chaotic state of mind, right? We can calmly and gently manage our thoughts. Oh, the thoughts. It gets easier the more you work on it. Um, I wonder if some of us weren't intentionally engineered to have learning difficulties like the infamous four-letter A word. Words are so exactly. So, but yeah, being able to still the mind and still be thinking is a talent for sure, but it's one that I do believe that we can cultivate. Um, Finally, sages emulate the mystic virtue in their interactions with other people. They nurture, encourage, teach, and mentor those around them without the need to possess, gloat, or dominate. That's lovely. I'm working on that. I feel like I want to nurture, encourage, teach, and mentor everyone around me. And not everyone wants it. So kind of trying not to hold on too tightly to that. Thanks, Katie. I appreciate you for saying that. um, okay, stay receptive, stay open. Let's see. Try and get it so we can see it a bit better.
Not for nothing, but in today's society, it's you don't get many people who are very receptive and open
No,
to
you're
much of anything.
right.
Uh, they're very easily, quote unquote, triggered without knowing what those triggers are or diving into it. Many people anymore, and I think to our detriment, when they were like, oh, don't talk about politics or religion, that was because of what a strong pull that those have.
Mm.
Um, with people not speaking about those, then they just kind of started not talking about even other topics that are also as important. And now nobody wants to really have discussion. It's hard for a lot of people to have civil discussions with having disagreements. I love these conversations, by the way, but not a lot of people seem to be able to. It just leads to argument, people getting heated and angry and not realizing that they're not, well, they're not their emotions, and they need to reflect why they're having such a knee-jerk reaction to having somebody who's opposing what I mean, well, you have some people believing some of these opinions that aren't even them are their core values and beliefs. Now, I know not everybody's doing the work, so I get it, but sheesh, there's a lot of people who you can't have discussions really with. And it's unfortunate because back in the day, when you talked about Socrates and Plato and any of them, it seemed like they had plenty of disagreements on many topics, but were able to have these extravagant conversations
Yeah.
that I love that do not seem very. There's not many people who entertain those conversations.
Well, I mean, unfortunately, the world is filled with folks who are closed-minded and closed off in their hearts as well. That's actually where we're headed to next, is into the center.
I was just
Oh,
going to
nice.
add that. I was just going to add that I think it's because it's fear based. I think a lot of people are living out of a place of fear
Mm-hmm.
and don't even realize it.
Yeah, well, and that's a big problem. When we operate from a place of fear, we're again kind of viewing the world from a perspective of survival mindset. And that is very detrimental to our own mental well-being and our relational um, well-being as well. We will find it very challenging to be able to relate to others if we're in survival mode. Yes, well, exactly. I was talking to a friend about that today, about how, what we think about, we bring about. And if you're constantly moaning and complaining, woe is me, life is miserable, well, then guess what you're going to attract? You're going to attract more of that. And I haven't heard back from that friend in a hot minute. So I don't know if I ticked him off or what, but um, we don't necessarily want to be drawing more of that negativity into our lives. So at some point we got to change it, right?
True. And it goes back to the embodiment of that language because so many people, they feel like it's their right to be able to complain about these things. It makes them angry, it frustrates them, so they should be able to complain about it. but without realizing that, hey, when you complain about these things, like you said, that's what you're drawing more of. But when you bring that to their attention, they take it offensively usually because, well, how dare you say I can't complain about things that bother me?
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Jess, did you have something you wanted to add?
Oh, no, I was just thinking about the whole saying guilty by association. It never
Mhm.
made sense to me growing up. But now that I'm older and I've gone through certain experiences and I see, negativity being so contagious, and you are who you hang out with.
Yeah.
Eventually you start to change because you're hearing these things and seeing these things. So it completely makes sense to me now. It didn't throw it up.
Mm-hmm.
I could definitely understand that. I don't remember. One of the many things I was listening to was speaking about how, if you are around lower vibrational people and they have all these terrible habits, even if you are not someone who usually partakes in terrible habits, you will most likely start picking them up. So it says if you have, say, 5 billionaire friends, you'll become the sixth. If you have 5 entrepreneurial friends, you'll become the sixth. So absolutely, who we hang out with and what energy we keep around us absolutely is going to affect our reality that we're creating around us. I completely agree with you because back in the day, I mean, I understood it to a degree because I've had cousins who hung out with the wrong people and wound up getting in a lot of trouble, even if from what they said they didn't do it. But on a higher level and deeper meaning, vibrationally speaking, that is very important.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, and you know what I always say, rising tides lift all ships. So I do believe in, okay, I may be around someone who is bringing me down, but I can try to bring them up first. Now, granted, I at some point have to learn when my efforts are not making any, they're of no value anymore, so that I have to be willing to cut loose some people that I may not really want to cut loose, but you can't keep dragging people along who don't want to do the work. They're going to have to um, either start doing their own work or at least helping you pull the load, you know what I mean? So, choosing very carefully who you spend your time with, and then knowing when to set healthy boundaries with people who are no longer kind of a vibratory match for you, I think is part of that discernment that we're supposed to be utilizing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. Because you would like to try to help everyone,
Mhm.
but in some cases, if your homeostasis or your balance is not there, they'll get you sick before you get them well.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
you just got to be extremely careful with that.
Yep,
You can always love from a distance.
that's right.
And again, I think that a lot of people are very comfortable
Mhm.
in the sickness because it's all they've known and what they've grown up in.
Mhm.
And it takes a lot of courage to um, change the energy around you, choose who you want around you in your life and what you're listening to, and the thoughts that you're having. It's
Yeah.
it's been a long journey for me, but it's so possible. A lot of people are so fear based because it's uncomfortable,
Mhm.
to change friendships or friend circles or whatnot. But it's part of living and it's necessary
It is.
sometimes.
And one of the things that came up for me yesterday as I was doing some of my own internal work was this idea of making excuses for other people's behavior. Like, I already don't like excuses. I don't like making excuses for my own behavior. I don't like it when other people make excuses for their behavior. And yet, there are people in my life who I make excuses for. I provide concessions for them, not so much from a state of grace, but more from a state of maybe pity or apathy or just um you know not wanting to even put my energy into that anymore. But what kind of disservice am I doing to that person by not holding them accountable for their behavior? Yeah, at what point does it become, okay, I'm done trying to hold you accountable. I'm walking away now versus, okay, you're not doing the work and I'm gonna just keep on helping you, keep on dragging you along. you know, Not everyone is willing to do the work, and we have to be just as willing to stop and help someone as we are or should I say, we should be just as willing to let go of those who are not willing to help themselves as we are to stop and help someone who needs our help. Does that make sense? Like, um, we have to know when enough is enough.
It
Over.
makes perfect sense. I think it's, again, just different for everyone, and we know ourselves best. So just coming back to center and knowing when that point is for you, you know?
Yeah.
So it makes perfect sense to me.
Well, one of the things too, I think, is that when we do continue to allow concessions for people's misbehavior, um, or for their lack of responsibility for their own behavior, we um, we kind of go against uh, our own needs in the sense that, like, um, it's almost like we're fighting against the current.
Yeah, I'm not for co-signing anyone's stuff if
Mhm.
there's something that needs to be said. I am very blunt, and maybe my delivery is not always the best. It's been a working process over the years with that, but I am super appreciative of people who are willing to call me out when I need to be called out,
Yeah.
because you don't know what you don't know, and
Mhm.
if no one tells you about it, of what you're doing, then you won't even know that you're doing it, you
Mhm.
know?
Yeah.
So, how can you change your thinking and make corrections and grow without having someone who has the courage to tell you in a loving way, if possible? Sometimes it's not always in the loving way,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
delivery is not always the best. I'm guilty of this, and I've been on the receiving end of the delivery not being the best. But I'm still appreciative for those moments, because if that's what it took at the moment to get me to open my mind and see a little clearer, then so be it. That's divine timing. That's just what it had to go down the way it did for me to get the lesson I needed to make a change.
Yeah. Well, and I had to agree with you when someone is honest with you and says, "Hey, look, I see you doing this, and I know that it's probably not good for you. Let's work together to fix it." That's a whole lot better than just like, "Ew, you're a jerk." And there's definitely a way to deliver that with tact and grace, but at the same time, you need people speaking truth into your life. And it's never comfortable, and it's always, at least, well, okay, maybe not for everyone. There are some people that will just say what needs to be said without any remorse, but I always feel incredibly uncomfortable when I have to hold someone accountable or make them aware of something that they might not previously have been aware of. But at the same time, I feel like it's unloving to not bring something to someone's attention, not from a place of judgment, but just from a place of compassion. Like, hey, I see you over here struggling, and I want you to know that you're not alone. Not like a, ew, you're being dumb, not trying to judge someone for what I perceive as an inadequacy or something. It's not like that. It's just like, hey, I don't know if you know this about yourself, but I always appreciate those people. It doesn't always feel good, but it is always necessary. And I think that you're right. Those kinds of people tend to be very few and far between. I even remember my mom always saying, well, little white lies aren't bad as long as there's something that you're saying to keep from hurting someone's feelings. And she would use the the example of like, oh, do I look nice in this dress? And just saying, oh, yeah, of course you do. And really, they look awful. But for me personally, if I look awful in that dress, can you please let me know? Because I don't want to walk around looking awful, you know?
Yeah. Well, and I'm sitting here thinking as we're talking, like how much of this is from a place of judgment? Like,
Mhm.
like bring it back to the study of, are we trying to push our expectations on others and control? I think, again, there's different levels. If it's obviously something that is, someone is completely self-sabotaging and harming themselves, or something like that, it's very clear that something needs to be said. But then other levels, it's you got to question, is it us trying to control or, push expectations, and instead of just letting things be and staying kind of out of it and letting them have their their lesson through life, you know?
Yeah.
So it's again with that, where do you draw the line? And I don't think there is an answer. And the more, kind of like the study says, the more we think, the more confused we'll be.
Yeah.
It's this is a very fascinating study, and it's very deep, and it's a lot to it. Um, I'm 100% enjoying this. I'm going to have to jump off here a little early. I will definitely catch up and watch the video,
Okay.
but our company is about to be here, and I I gotta jump off.
Yeah, no,
I
it's
love you ladies though, and I will catch up, and then I will talk to you this week.
all right. Sounds good. Love
All
you.
right. Good night. Love ya.
Good
Bye.
night. So this discernment is coming in again. Jessica's right. At what point do we draw the line? Um, I do think that, at least in most instances, it should be easy to tell whether or not you are just trying to impose your will on someone else or whether you are doing it for their benefit. But also, like she said, at what point are you kind of saving them from the lesson? Katie, you and I listen to the Energy Boutique pretty regularly, and I know that you've heard Marley say the same thing about how sometimes we can interrupt someone else's karma, we can interrupt someone else's lesson, and that's actually not a good thing. We I think a lot of us tend to kind of have this Florence Nightingale syndrome where we just want to help everybody. We just want to save everybody. And unfortunately, it's the people who are not willing to save themselves that's, even though we may perceive them as needing the most help because they're not willing to take the necessary actions to save themselves, at the same time, what damage are we doing to them because we're just rescuing them instead of allowing them to learn? One second. Okay, my apologies. Um, okay, so verse 11 or chapter 11, 30 spokes in one hub In its emptiness, there is the function of a vehicle. A wheel may have 30 spokes, but its usefulness lies in the empty hub. We join spokes together in a wheel, but it is the center hole that makes the wagon move. Let's go down to here. We tend to associate substance with usefulness and dismiss the lack of substance as usefulness, or I'm sorry, as useless. Lao Tzu goes against this thinking and points out the very opposite. The hole in the hub of the wheel allows the axle to go through. Therefore, it is the emptiness there, not the substance, that gives the wheel its crucial functionality as part of a carriage. There is more to emptiness than meets the eye. I love this. All right, continuing forward, mix clay to create a container. In its emptiness, there is the function of a container. A jar is formed from clay, but its usefulness lies in the empty center. We shape clay into a pot, but it is the emptiness inside that holds whatever we want. The same is true for containers. While we cannot dispute that the substance of the container is necessary, we also must admit that it is the empty space in the container that allows it to contain. Without that emptiness, the container would not be functional at all. So this is very interesting because to me, it brings up images of the contrast between the light and the dark and how you cannot have one without the other, right? If you have no darkness, then how can you understand what light is and vice versa? So this idea of the outside of the container being necessary, the inside of the container, which has no physical substance, is just as necessary, right? Sometimes it is that which is not there that is the most meaningful aspect of a situation. Words that were never said, experiences that were never had. Sometimes it is the absence of things that ends up being the most profound in a situation or a circumstance. Cut open doors and windows to create a room. In its emptiness, there is the function of a room. Therefore, that which exists is used to create benefit. That which is empty is used to create functionality. A room is made from 4 walls, but its usefulness lies in the space between. Matter is necessary to give form, but the value of reality lies in its immateriality. Everything that lives has a physical body, but the value of a life is measured by the soul. I love that one. We hammer wood for a house, but it is the inner space that makes it livable. We work with being, but non-being is what we use. So the container could also be our physical body, right? It gives us form. But our true value, our intrinsic value, lies in our souls, our personalities, all of that which is intangible by nature. The value of our lives is truly measured by our souls. We can think of rooms as containers of people. As such, they also require both substance and emptiness in order to function. The walls of a room must accommodate emptiness, and we need at least one opening in one wall to access a room. We simply cannot do without emptiness. We can also think of the Tao as the ultimate container, because everything is embedded in the Tao. It then follows automatically that it is the emptiness of the Tao that gives it power and functionality. How can it be that everything comes from the Tao? The emptiness makes it so. This is that idea of everything, all potentiality existing in nothingness. Any thoughts? Any questions? Look like you're deep in thought.
I'm just listening.
Lot to take in, isn't it? But do you see the importance of emptiness? Yeah. Sometimes it is the lack that gives the abundance value. All right. Moving on. This is our last verse of the night. The 5 colors make one blind in the eyes. The 5 sounds make one deaf in the ears. The 5 flavors make one tasteless in the mouth. Okay. Too much light blinds the eye. Too much noise deafens the ear. Too many spices dull the taste. Too much exercise weakens the body. The pursuit of great riches lead to ruin. Colors blind the eye, sounds deafen the ear, flavors numb the taste, thoughts weaken the mind, desires wither the heart. The 5 colors, 5 sounds, and 5 flavors denote the vast array of sensory stimulations in the material world. Excessive indulgence in these stimulations leads to sensory overload, followed by fatigue, numbness, boredom, and apathy. This is more true than ever in today's world, with its virtually endless entertainment options. To compensate for our dull and jaded senses, we turn the intensity of sensory stimuli way up. This gives us a temporary thrill, but soon it fades. We return to a dismal state of dissatisfaction, which drives us to seek even greater thrills. So the physical world can kind of get in the way of our perception of the Tao and of our oneness with it. And when we brought up the 5 senses there, it made me think of this Vitruvian Man and the 5 Chinese elements. So we have fire, water, air, and then earth is actually separated into wood and metal. So that would be the 5 senses. And there are some diagrams online that kind of show you the correlation, at least in the Chinese culture, with the different elements and the different parts of the body and how they're influenced. Typically, the digestive system is fire. You know, obviously, the lungs are air, things like that. But we can overstimulate ourselves and kind of dull ourselves to the Tao and to our connection to it. So we definitely need to be seeking that which is beyond the material. If we're solely focused on money, riches, wealth, fame, possessions, whatever, or even just satiating our appetite, right? We are still focusing on the material in that instance, and we need to be able to separate ourselves from that. Okay. Racing and hunting make one wild in the heart. Goods that are difficult to acquire make one cause damage. Therefore, the sages care for the stomach and not the eyes. That is why they discard the other and take this. The wise attend to the inner truth of things and are not fooled by outward appearances. They ignore matter and seek the spirit. The master observes the world, but trusts his inner vision. He allows things to come and go. His heart is open as the sky. So We're going to look at both 2 and 3. I've translated the key character in this line, shuang, as tasteless. This can cause confusion. In modern Chinese, it means refreshing, which is a positive feeling, not at all congruent with blindness or deafness in the previous 2 lines. This is a perfect example of where the ancient usage of the character is very different from the modern meaning. In this context, the true definition of shuang is a negative connotation. When combined with ko, the character for mouth, it means loss of taste. This negative connotation has not completely disappeared from modern Chinese. For instance, shuang yu means failing to show up for a date or an appointment. And then number 3. Caring for the stomach means focusing on one's basic needs and living life with plainness. Caring for the eyes means acquiring even more sensory stimuli, more eye candy. The former is the only sure cure for sensory overindulgence, and that is why the sages embrace it and discard the latter. They let go of the many temptations of the material world and reach for the simplicity of the Tao. Trust your inner vision, right? Be the master that observes, but be the master who has a firm grasp on his or her intuition as well. Ignore matter and seek the spirit. That's the whole purpose of this study every week, is to be seeking the spirit and not focusing on the matter. Right? So that is all. Final thoughts, questions, insights, revelations, epiphanies, anything? Got anything to add, Katie, before we wrap up with prayer? I know you're decorating. Yeah, she's decorating for Jason's birthday. Okay. All righty. Well, on that note, we'll end the recording. We bid you adieu.